Welcome back, Western. My name's Greg.
And I'm Tina.
And we're here with your Western Student News. One of today's top stories, is it blue and black? Is it white and gold? More on that later, but for now...
In prevalent news today, the diagnosis of face blindness disorder, or prosopagnosia, has taken a drastic increase in the Western student body. Prosopagnosia is an inability to recognize the faces of familiar people, typically as a result of improper development or damage to the brain. Individuals may be born with the disorder or develop it later in life, typically after experiencing a serious brain trauma or stroke.
Awesome, yes, that's right. Thank you, Tina. Western Campus has reported that the incidence of the disorder has increased from a low 2% to 10%, a staggering increase. Roughly 2,200 students diagnosed with the disorder in the last month alone. Shown here is a video clip of one of Western's student with her best friend earlier this week.
So meet you at 7 tonight at the Smoke?
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect.
Mondays to Friday, I'm trying to make it back home by Monday morning. I swear I wish somebody would drive. Ooh, that's all I want. And I know that I'm tonight thinking.
Carly Prawns live at the UCC with more on the issue.
So Carly, you've been talking to students on campus today. Are people aware of the disorder currently striking their campus?
Yes, I have Carlos here with me right now, and his roommate was diagnosed with the disorder just last week. Carlos, can you tell me what you know about prosopagnosia?
Honestly, Carly, as far as I'm concerned, my roommate has always had a hard time distinguishing faces. But when it comes to other things, he's fine.
Okay. And can you tell me what exactly his diagnosis is?
Well, from what I hear, there are different subtypes of prosopagnosia, but he has the most common one, congenital prosopagnosia. Now that he's actually diagnosed and I realize it's actually a real thing, I'm worried about contracting it myself, actually.
So even though the two of you live together, he sometimes doesn't recognize you?
Yeah, exactly. Like if I were to pass him on the street, he just walks right by.
And this is how he's always been?
Yeah.
Thanks, Carly. We cut now to psychologist Jane Brads at the university to explain a little bit more about the disorder. Prosopagnosia does not seem to be a deficit in face perception, but rather remembering the face. Prosopagnosia can be a very socially and emotionally debilitating disorder. Those who fail to recognize faces often do not realize that they struggle more with the very basic tasks than other individuals. This often leads to self-blame, and these individuals identify themselves with a social rather than neurological disorder. Regardless of subtype, many prosopagnosics experience anxiety and may start to avoid social situations, both out of protecting themselves and the fear of coming across as rude. Prosopagnosics often force themselves to be nice to everyone in the case that they might know the person, but also feel very vulnerable talking to people they do not recall. Outside of a social context, prosopagnosics often do not enjoy watching shows with many characters, as it gets too challenging for them to follow. Additionally, this disorder must be compensated for in one's career and family life as well. Co-workers get frustrated, sometimes costing individuals their job in cases where their employer is not very understanding, and family members must exhibit great patience. The most surprising of all, prosopagnosics could easily confuse their own child with another, fail to recognize their spouse, and have no idea they are looking at a photograph or mirror image of themselves. I will hand things over now to neurologist Casey Special.
The two main branches of prosopagnosia are congenital prosopagnosia and acquired prosopagnosia. Congenital prosopagnosia is a condition that individuals are born with or develop in early childhood. As congenital implies, it is related to genetics, and indeed there was once reported an entire family of prosopagnosiacs. Visual deprivation as a child, such as congenital cataracts, do not seem to allow the proper connections within the brain to form, and these connections are unable to be restored at a later age. The second subtype is acquired prosopagnosia, often from brain damage. A posterior cerebral artery stroke, alcohol intoxication, and neurodegenerative diseases are amongst the list of causes. In both cases, the area most associated with prosopagnosia is the ventral occipitotemporal lobe, specifically in the right hemisphere, and the neural connections in this area. The occipital lobe tends to be more related to visual processing, and the temporal lobe more so for retaining visual memories. Specifically, in the temporal cortex, the mid-fusiform gyrus, known as the fusiform face area, and the inferior occipital gyrus in the occipital cortex show more of a response to faces than other objects. When these brain areas are damaged, absent, or do not have the proper connections to them, facial stimuli may, depending on the circumstance, activate them in similar ways to what they would be activated for less specific object recognition, or facial stimuli may activate the lateral occipital cortex, excluding the inferior occipital gyrus, used in normal individuals for less specific recognition of regular objects. In congenital prosopagnosia, brain areas appear to be intact, but the proper connections were not made between the fusiform face area, inferior occipital gyrus, and the ventral visual pathway. In acquired prosopagnosia, after damage to the brain, plasticity does not seem to be sufficient enough to get other areas of the brain to take over the face recognition task. Plasticity being the ability of neurons to make connections to areas of the brain. It is important to realize the complexity of the disorder, and most forms of prosopagnosia are not pure, meaning that those suffering brain damage to these areas also often struggle with other visual tasks. The areas encoding face and object recognition in the brain are distinct, but close, and often when there is damage causing prosopagnosia, the brain damage extends into the parahippocampal gyrus, causing other visual perception deficits, and in some cases, individuals are unable to recognize their surroundings.
We now go to Dr. Shing at the campus hospital to learn more about the diagnostic process.
Now, some may be concerned about the increased diagnosis of prosopagnosia at our hospital, but the medical team here believes that we have something to be very proud of. Prosopagnosia often goes undiagnosed, causing people to frequently develop other serious mental health issues and misguided beliefs about themselves. By helping hundreds of individuals to recognize that they have prosopagnosia over these past weeks, it is our understanding that to most individuals, diagnosis is a relief. Diagnosis allows those suffering to realize that their shortcomings in face recognition are of no fault of their own. We believe this allows people to better understand their condition, connect with others in the same situation, and prevent future depression. Contact a medical consultant if you relate to any of these diagnostics of prosopagnosia. A current test used here at the hospital is the Warrington Face Recognition Task, which asks participants to rank 50 faces as pleasant or unpleasant. 50 pairs of faces are then presented, and the patient is asked to choose the face that they saw in the previous pleasant versus unpleasant list. The newest and seemingly best test for prosopagnosia to date is the Cambridge Face Memory Test, a computer-generated test of faces without hair, ears, and necks, commonly used for identification. Unfortunately, face recognition in real life is far more complex than current tests allow us to account for. These tests presented still faces, but in real life, people are constantly moving. This fMRI test for brain activity are also used, but being a relatively uncommon disorder, this is often not used, and people are let off being told they are not prosopagnosics when indeed they may be. Unfortunately, at this time, there is no cure for prosopagnosia, and all we can do for these individuals is help them to build on compensatory skills many of them have already required. We suggest to them different ways to recognize people through their voice, walk, composure, hair, scars, and other physical. Another beneficial resource are chat groups, as they allow prosopagnosics to realize that they are not alone. The London Face Blind group meets several times a year. The Encephalitis Society puts people with similar experiences in touch. And other online chat groups for more global communication can be found simply by Googling the key terms.
New in, Brad Pitt, Chuck Close, and Sweden's Crown Princess Victoria are all very successful people suffering from prosopagnosia. Brad Pitt has shared a message to newly diagnosed patients, encouraging them and letting them know that the disorder does not need to get in the way of their success.
If you feel like you've identified with any of these symptoms,
or would like more information on the disorder, please contact the number on the bottom of the screen.
And that will be it for today, Western. My name's Greg.
And I'm Tina.
And this is your Western Student News.
I'm standing still without you, the emptiest of fields. I wish that I could say what's on my mind. The straw that fills your heart.